Uh, Dear members, I'm very pleased to see you in person after 3 years. I think one of the specialities of this assembly is the personal relationship that we create in these meetings. It's not only the resolutions, the reports that we vote on, but it's also the personal relations. And I think in the last 3 years, we've had enough of meetings online, and I think this meeting in person was something that many of you were yearning for. Unfortunately, some of our friends and colleagues are still stranded in Amsterdam, Frankfurt. Eventually, they'll make it here. But everybody is very keen, and I can see that everybody is also very upset of missing out at the very beginning of our meeting. But this shows that there is an appetite, a desire for members to meet in person, to talk to each other, to talk at each other. So this is good news. I'd like to thank the UK delegation for hosting our event here. The UK delegation has done a great job in arranging this venue and also making sure that we could meet in person. They worked very closely with our conference team. I'd like to thank Gustavo and all his team who have arranged this meeting. The last meeting that we had was in Luxembourg 3 years ago, and since then we've gone through very challenging times. I think never in the history of this assembly we've been challenged by two facts like the COVID and the war in Ukraine. I think the challenge of COVID was, especially for us, a big challenge because, as I said, the nature of this assembly is that members of parliament meet, talk to each other, create personal relations, and doing so via video was, of course, challenging. But I think the assembly reacted to this stress test very well. I think that we came up with clever ideas, the webinars, the possibilities of having meetings online. Some of you have complained that we had even more meetings online than actually when we have a regular 3 statutory meetings during the year. So I think we've been very active during COVID. I'd like to also pay tribute to President Serratelli, who also kind of led us through this period and pushing us into making a lot of webinars on the different issues of how the COVID pandemic hit our assembly. And I think that we've learned one lesson from the challenge of COVID is that all the issues that we deal in the Parliamentary Assembly, be it climate change, be it fight against terrorism, movement of people, conflict prevention, conflict resolutions, the health issues, all of these require global solutions. They all require that members of parliament and governments talk to each other, work with each other, and that solutions are found beyond the national boundaries. And I think this is the takeaway I take from COVID that most of us have taken, and I think this assembly then is well placed to do exactly that kind of job of creating the necessary conditions for finding solutions to this problem, which by nature have a transnational nature. On the war in Ukraine, I'd like to express the fact that I'm extremely proud on how we have conducted ourselves. We were actually in Vienna on the 24th of February when the invasion started. I think the Assembly took a posture which was a very realistic posture. We understood who we are, what is the kind of contribution we can provide as members of parliament, as an institution of the OSCE, and I think we have conducted ourselves extremely well. We have been very vocal, we have spoken up against the war, we have spoken up in all possible fora and at all possible level. I think we have also done some field visits, which were important, going to the border of Poland, and I thank here the Polish delegation for arranging that, Poland and Ukraine, to meet the refugees and to see it from the victims' perspective. We've conducted a lot of webinars, a lot of Helsinki Plus 50 call for action meetings on this issue. Recently, last week, with the President and other colleagues, we've been to Kiev in a long trip by train, but it gave us also an opportunity to us, but also to the Assembly, to witness firsthand the disaster that took place in all Ukraine, but especially in Irpin and Bucha. And we had an opportunity also to meet the authorities in Kiev. I think this was a testimony. Also, we were the first OSCE institution, followed by Matteo Mecacci of the ODIHR yesterday, to be in Kiev. But this also showed a testimony of how much this assembly, made up of 57 parliaments representing 1 billion citizens, parliamentarians representing 1 billion citizens, cares about this issue. And I can tell you that our delegation there was really a witness of all the care and all the work that you've done by yourself in your own legislations, in your own parliaments, and all the public stands that you've taken also individually. I'd like to also address the elephant in the room, or should I say the bear outside the room. We have in this period received an exchange of letters from the Russian Federation, from the Belarusian Federations, from the Swiss delegation from the UK about the fact that the Russian Federation and the Belarusian Federation are not present in this meeting. The President and myself were here in March to meet with the UK authorities. We have expressed the position of this assembly, which is the position of defending, of course, also the resolutions of this assembly. The assembly in 2016 adopted a resolution calling for ensuring that all parliamentarians can participate in all OSCE events without any restrictions. I think the International Secretariat, the President and the leadership of the Parliamentary Assembly exhausted our part of responsibility by ensuring that the entire Assembly is invited. So the entire Assembly is invited, and indeed all members who wanted to register for this event could register for the event. The actual physical presence at this meeting is also, and it's part of the memorandum of understanding we normally have with host parliaments, participants also have to follow the law and have to be in line with the local legislation of the host country. So the fact that some delegates are not present here, it is not a sanction against the entirety of the Assembly, but is a sanction against individuals who, for some reason, are on the sanctions list of the UK, but also of other countries in Europe. So I think with this, we can close it here, the issue of whether the Russian Federation and the Belarusian Federation are here or not here. I think the OSCE, let's say, principles have been adhered to, and the International Secretariat responsibility to ensure that the principle of the OSCPA are adhered to has been met. I'd like to take from here a point on the Helsinki Plus 50 project that Ambassador Zanier, former Secretary General of the OSCE, is helping us carry out in our Assembly, because I think this plugs in very well to the future of our organization. For many years, I've served this organization in the field, now in the Secretariat of the Parliamentary Assembly. I'm a strong believer of this organization. I think this organization does a lot of good work in the field, a lot of good work in its institutions. There are many people who benefit from the work of the Parliamentary Assembly, but very few people know it outside those who work in it. And I say very few people, and I don't mean the greater public who reads the New York Times or watches CNN. I mean also people in foreign ministries or in the highest level of the political leadership in Europe and in other countries. So I think an effort has to be made if we want to strengthen and preserve this organization, especially in the moment when it is extremely challenged by some who argue also that we should eliminate some countries from the organization, thus rendering it, I would say, redundant. It's exactly to try to relaunch this organization, to be very firm on the principle of the organization, firm on the reasons why this organization was founded, sanctioning, of course, those who violate the rules of the game, because we cannot close our eyes blind. We have to have dialogue in this organization, but we also have to call those who violate the rules of the game responsible and find the mechanisms to sanction those who are responsible. But I think we need to preserve this organization because, as far as I know, it's the only place where we can discuss issues of global interest, but especially issues of security and cooperation in an area of 1 billion citizens, but also with an angle that covers all the aspects of security, be it the economic and social, the human rights, and the hard level of security and political military security. A word, Madam President, if you allow me, on my tenure here as the Secretary General of the Parliamentary Assembly. I'm now reaching towards the midterm, let's say, of my mandates in the Parliamentary Assembly. And it's a moment also to kind of collect our thoughts and think of where we are and where we were. And I think I could fairly comfortably say that I'm very proud of the work we've done during the last 6 years. You will see on your table a little leaflet that we have printed out. I think what we've managed to do since I became Secretary General is to, first of all, at the Secretariat, create an international civil servant body, and you see there are new colleagues here, by the way, some of them who are doing for the first time an annual session. I think we have a staff and an international secretariat which has become very professional. It was professional before, of course, but it's now also expanded. And we have also created within the secretariat the necessary condition to depersonalize and take away all the aspects of excessive arbitration from the leadership of the secretariat, but introduced rules. Now we have staffing rules and regulations, which were not present before my tenure. We have financial rules and regulations. We've heard the Treasurer's report. By the way, I thank you very much for providing the necessary resources to this Assembly to carry out its work. But I would like to remind members that before my tenure, there were no financial rules and regulations in this organization. The Secretary General had the total freedom of exercising financial arbitrarity on the budget. What we have introduced here is, what I have introduced, is presenting to the Standing Committee and the Bureau a set of financial rules and regulations which I borrowed by Ambassador Zanier when he was the Secretary General of the OSCE, so basically taking those rules and having the Standing Committee adopt them, and those rules now regulate how we run our finances. And it is very important because you will see in February our audits normally is done, it's an audit of our accounts. This audit of our accounts is done against the rules. If you don't have rules, the auditor will audit your accounts based on the word of the Secretary General. And I think it's very important when we deal with money, when we deal with staff, that there is less arbitrarity and more regulations. I think as we are, many of us are new in this assembly, we are seeing many new faces in terms of secretaries of delegations, also many new members. I think it will be useful in the months to come from September onwards to borrow again something that Secretary General Lamberto Zanier was doing in the Secretariat of the OSCE, which is the hour with the Secretary General, he used to call it. I mean, we can call it a moment, online informal meeting of myself being available to answer questions, to interact with the secretaries of delegations, and maybe the following month with members also, in an informal setting, so that we can give you in advance ideas of what we are planning to do and answer questions. I see that there is sometimes a lot of discussions between secretaries of delegations that come to me through a colleague who interacts more with that person, but it's nice to have also an institutional moment, informal, where I would be available to answer questions, to clarify points, and also to announce what we are planning to do. I think in my experience in international organization is that sometimes misunderstanding comes from the fact that people don't feel included or were not aware of something happening, and then all of a sudden there is something coming up. I think that if everybody is duly informed on a regular basis, the decisions are made in a faster and smoother way. So I will be available to launch this idea from the month of September. And I would like to conclude with a word of appreciation for my colleagues at the International Secretariat. I think, and some of you have already interacted with them, so those who work with Special Representative and others. I think we have a very professional staff at the Secretariat, dedicated. It is not easy sometimes to work in this kind of setting because it is not a classical job 5 to 7 where you go to the post office, with all respect for those who work in those jobs. But we work with people, we work with individual members of parliament. Each of them have their own demands, requests. So we try to be extremely flexible, extremely accommodating. I worked in the private sector before as a customer service. I think I've tried to impose to my colleague a little bit of this attitude of being extremely accommodating and customer service oriented, and I think I'm very proud of the work that they do, and I think that we will continue to do this work with a smile on our face for the year to come, considering that we have received a new budget. Thank you very much, Madam President. This concludes my budget, and I'm available for any questions, of course.